As we begin to talk about public health campaigns, we should start by talking about some key terms in the field of health communication. So, we start with beliefs. Beliefs are what is true for you. They're the mental acceptance that something is true, even if it can't be proven. So, education is good, God created the universe, technology is progress. So these are beliefs that exist, even if someone tries to disprove it to you, it essentially can. It is central to your idea about things. Some beliefs we hold strongly, others not as much, and we can hold many different beliefs. Beliefs can change over time, and some experiences may modify them. So, sometimes our beliefs are subject to cognitive processes, but fundamentally, beliefs are what is true for you. Values, on the other hand, are what is important to you. Values are a subset of beliefs. They remain relatively stable, and they have an affective component, which means that there's this emotional connection. Values also tend not to be just personal. They are connected to larger ideals, whether it's family, reference group, or the larger zeitgeist. And our values are deeply intertwined with our lives. They're connected to major life goals or modes of conduct that promote those goals. So we can think about values in two ways. Values can be terminal or instrumental. Terminal values are the goals that we're working for and consider most desirable. They're goals we'd like to see in our lifetime. Things like freedom, equality, friendship, or maybe more specific, social recognition, a prosperous life. In contrast, there are instrumental values. And these are the preferred types of behavior that they aren't ends in and of themselves, but they're modes of behavior that help you achieve your desired terminal values. So if you value freedom, then independent is an instrumental value. It helps you be free. If you value equality, being helpful, maybe working for the welfare of others, is a way to serve that terminal value of equality. Being dependable or reliable may be terminal values, maybe instrumental values to get to that terminal value of friendship. Now, we may have a limited number of values, but we have a much broader array of beliefs. We have many, many attitudes on top of that. And attitudes are more specific than beliefs and values. Attitudes always represent approval or disapproval of a specific person, group, idea, or event. Attitudes are in this way, because it's approve or disapprove, are always, always specific. Attitudes are based on beliefs. So some attitudes are based off of strongly held beliefs, like values, and others are sort of weaker because it's just other beliefs that we have. So let me give you an example. I can have a value of wisdom. Now, a related belief is that education is important. And the related attitude that comes from that is pro-college, right? So I start with the value, which is wisdom. I then get a belief that's connected. Education is important. And then an attitude that's positive, negative, here, pro-college. Another example. family security. That's my value. And so I have this belief that kids are better off with two parents because I believe in family security. This is what I want. That's my value. And because of that, for divorce, I am opposed, right? My attitude towards divorce is one of opposition. But sometimes we can run into conflicts. A value of happiness, right? Let's say that's something I hold. And my related belief is that harmony is good. However, an unhappy marriage with discord and pain, well, maybe then I'm feeling if I'm going by the value of happiness, maybe divorce is okay. So my value of family security runs up against my value of happiness. And the question is, which one do I weigh more heavily? Which one is more salient? And oftentimes, this is what we're running up against when we're trying to persuade people. There are different values that they have that are in opposition, and we have to find ways to make one value more salient than another. And that is where we often are with persuasion. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is needs. Needs are something that we're thinking a lot about when we're talking about marketing based campaigns. So you may have heard of psychologist Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he puts forward this hierarchical model. And at the bottom of the model are biological needs. And these are basic life needs: air, food, water, shelter, warmth. He put sex there too, and sleep. Above that, safety needs: protection, security, order, law, limits, stability. Okay. Once you have that, you can have belonging and love needs: family, affection, relationships, even a work group. So we need those things. And then self-esteem or esteem needs. And this has to do with like achievement, status, responsibility, reputation. And at the very top of this pyramid, Maslow put self-actualization, which is personal growth and fulfillment. Now, in Maslow's formulation, he felt you couldn't actually go from one level until you had achieved the bottom. So if you're still struggling to eat and to feel safe, then you can't move on to belonging and love needs. And I think essentially we know this isn't true. There are lots of people who are starving who still love each other and have support systems and value those things. But his idea was that we have to meet these different levels first. And you can't talk to someone about being, self-actualized if they're starving. Now, another thing that's interesting about this is that whereas a lot of people will study these things from a point of pathology, Maslow actually decided to look at healthy people and high achievers. And so he studied in his group people like Eleanor Roosevelt, Albert Einstein, Jane Addams. And what he was suggesting was that looking at these people, what were the needs they had met? And he said, basically, very few people, maybe 2% of the population, ever reach self-actualization. When we're talking about commercial advertising, it tends to go in that esteem space and the belonging and love needs. That those kinds of pitches that we're doing, if you're talking about beauty products, that's all about, people wanting to be loved. If you're talking about selling people some kind of status item, a fancy car, that's going to esteem needs. It may be going to belonging and love as well. Other types of advertising do go to safety needs. If you're advertising to people about an alarm system, you are addressing safety needs, and you've got to make them feel unsafe first before they want your product. We can also think of this as health campaigns being at that bottom of the model, right? So if I'm worried about my basic health, I need medication that's going to help me so that I can even think about these other things. So it's useful when we're thinking about campaigns to think about where is it that our, the product in some way, the message, intervention that we're selling goes in terms of needs, and what might be the best need that we use to advertise to get someone there. And they're not always the same. Another really important term is the term self-efficacy. And this was put forward by Albert Bandura. And he said, people's level of motivation, affective states, and actions are based more on what they believe than on what is objectively true. So in this model, that what is essential is the belief that you can do something. Self-efficacy is the belief in one's own ability to exert personal control over a situation. Now, it should be noted that this isn't about reality. It's not about your actual ability. It's about your perception of it. So if you believe you can do something, well, you're more likely to be able to do it. It is worth thinking about this as well as barrier assessment. Self-efficacy is comprised as well of an individual's assessment of potential barriers and their thoughts about whether they can overcome them. People with low self-efficacy see these as problems, these barriers as problems, and things to be avoided. Whereas people with high self-efficacy see them as problems to solve, to conquer. In a health context, self-efficacy is incredibly important. Do you believe that you will be able to exercise every day, factoring in your willpower, your schedule, opportunity, etc.? Do you believe you'll be able to quit smoking? And you're factoring in your past experiences, stress, environment. Do your friends smoke? Does your boss smoke? And what we find is that self-efficacy is an excellent predictor. Your answer to those questions go a long way to determining your actual success. And it suggests that confident people do better than those with low self-esteem, not because they have been successful in the past necessarily, but because they have higher expectations of their own success. Now, Bandura recognized that self-efficacy was a result of many factors. Your confidence is built in relation to your environment, to how people have treated you. But again, this is this idea of like, I think I can, and if you can, you will. So often what we're doing in public health campaigns is trying to raise people's self-efficacy, helping them feel that they are able to achieve the goals. The last set of terms I want to talk about are heuristics. Heuristics are mental shortcuts that allow people to make judgments quickly and efficiently. They're simple rules that can be hardwired. And in some ways, they are evolutionarily necessary. You see a wild animal, you go danger, right? Because you don't have time to look at that tiger and say, well, is this a nice tiger or a vicious tiger? Your brain says, that's a tiger, tigers are dangerous, run. So we can have that kind of experience. There's an evolutionary need for it. We can also have learn things through experience. So that can be, Pavlov's dogs, conditioning, or maybe even something like, you see a poster for an action movie and you decide to see it because, in the past, you liked action movies. What's important about heuristics is that they are efficient. They prevent us from having to spend a lot of time thinking about things. But of course, there's a problem. Even though they're useful, they can lead to errors. Just because you've had an experience in the past doesn't mean it will happen again. Just because you think someone is dangerous does not mean that they are. So we talk about two different types of heuristics. One is the availability heuristic. And what this does is it takes your past experiences and applies it to the current situation. So I'll give you an example. Say you had a friend in grade school who had red hair, and she was really funny, just like so funny, always made you laugh. Therefore, because of that, you generalize to believe that all people with red hair have a great sense of humor. This clearly is not the case, right? Another example of a representative heuristic. This is a reliance on prototypes in your mind. Prototype, type of heuristic in some way, it's a stereotype, okay? So let's think. Let's say you see a Doberman in a person's yard, and you're going to go visit the person, but here's this Doberman, and you're afraid, not because you've ever seen a Doberman pinscher before, but because your prototype, probably from the media, is that Dobermans are vicious guard dogs. But, it could be that this is a very sweet dog, and you will never get to know this dog because you have decided in advance that it is dangerous. So the thing is, I've given you examples that are harmless, but clearly ideas about danger and who is dangerous, we see what happens when people act on that, and they shoot first and ask questions later, right? Because the thing is that even though I've walked it through this mental process, these processes are often unconscious. And whenever we use shortcuts, we can make mistakes. Heuristic processing, of course, can play a significant role in cases of racial bias. And they can lead to all sorts of errors in less severe ways as well. So when we are convincing people, when we are using messaging, we are also relying on heuristic cues because people often don't have the time to cognitively process all messages.